Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 312 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is Reset Your Mindset. Our quote of the day comes to us from Steve Maraboli. Once your mindset changes, everything on the outside will change along with it. I have to say a very special thank you to everyone that has supported our new book, The Positivity Tribe. If you have yet to join our tribe, please head on over to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever else books are sold. I had an absolute blast recording today's episode. Dr. Rob Gilbert is a fascinating guy, and he definitely delivers, so make sure you take some notes. He even challenged me to think outside the box, which is always fun. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Rob, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
I'm glad to be here.
I appreciate it. So the first question I ask everybody is the same one I'm going to ask you is, are you ready to positively impact at least one person today?
Well, if I positively impact myself, that would be a good job.
You've already positively impacted me before we started, so that's two people. So as you know, before we jumped on here, the number one objective of our show.
Let me answer that in a non-cute way. So when I teach, or even when I teach online, but suppose the old days when I taught in a classroom, before the class started, I have a ritual. I look at the door where the kids just came in, and I tell myself that if I have anything to do with this, and of course I do, that these kids are going to leave the room more inspired than when they came in. So I think I'm unlike most of my colleagues. My first job is inspiration, not information. Everybody else in the world of PowerPoint is information. No, if you're inspired, all the information is there. My job is inspiration. If I could get them to leave more excited, more inspired, more energized, then they could get the information on their own. But if I give them information and they leave without a different energy level, I failed. And educators don't see this. Educators don't see that they're failing, you know? Somebody once said, if our educational system were given to us by a foreign country, we'd consider it an act of war. I mean, that's how horrible it is. And I know I'm getting away from what you want to do.
No, not at all. I think the beauty of this show is it's the guest and where they take it. And I've been a listener of the Success Hotline, which I'll touch on in a second. But I wanted to actually skip over the no quit story for a second, because I wanted you to touch on the career you have in sports psychology, because I think it's a unique avenue that most people don't know about it. And when I was in college, I didn't fully understand what it is. So I just wanted to ask if you wouldn't mind just briefly touching on what it is exactly you do.
Yeah. Well, I'm a college professor. I've been at Montclair State University in New Jersey since 1969. I did my graduate and undergraduate education at UMass Amherst, where I studied with Dr. Walter Kroll, one of the grandfathers of the field of sports psychology. And the most basic question is, well, what is sports psychology? And the way I explain this to people, I say, well, Chris, do you remember when you went to school?
Yep.
And you remember every night your teachers gave you homework and they told you what to study?
Yes.
Do you ever have any teachers that taught you how to study?
Never.
I mean, this is, memorize all the presidents. Well, why don't you teach me how to memorize it? We're telling the kids what to do, but we're not teaching them the strategies of how to do it. So that's what sports psychology is. Coaches always say, relax, concentrate, get motivated, but they're never telling the kids how to relax, how to concentrate, how to get motivated. That's what it's all about.
I think it's so interesting that you touch on that the way you did, because I think one of the things that I coach my clients is in goal setting and having that target. And when I sit down for the first time, whether it's a sports team, a sales team, or an individual, I'll ask some of those very basic questions. And what I realized within the last few years is we are not taught how to do things. And to your point, study this, on Friday we're going to have an exam on fractions, and they don't tell you or teach you or coach you how to go about learning it. And I think that is so important. So I got to ask you the no quit story. So I'm curious if at some point in your life, personally or professionally, you could have given up or given in, but you didn't.
Could have given up. Well, I'm wearing my high school hat. I went to Boston Latin School in Boston, Massachusetts. Out of 300 well, before we get to graduation, it's a public school. Imagine the guidance counselor calling your parents in and asking the parents to take me out of the school. They say, this school's too hard for your kid. Take him, take him out of the school. They wouldn't take me out. So I graduated 300 out of 322. That's the bottom 10%, not the top 10%. I went to UMass Amherst, and I failed 10 three-credit courses. I flunked out of school my second semester junior year. I graduated with a 1.92 grade point average. So I could have quit in high school. I could have quit as an undergraduate through a series of interesting events. I got into graduate school at the same place I flunked out of. And I got a PhD from the same school I flunked out of. And a few years ago, I was nominated as the outstanding alumnus from the same school I flunked out of. So I guess they forgot I flunked out. So I'm saying that along the way, see, I don't look at winning and losing. I look at it as winning and learning. But getting to your question, here's the one thing I am most proud of. That in 1968, I tried out for the United States Olympic wrestling team. I was a wrestler at UMass. Now, was I a good wrestler? No. You want an excuse why I wasn't a good wrestler? Well, where I went to high school in Boston, they didn't have wrestling. But when I saw wrestling, I loved wrestling. So I went into so you can imagine how good I was. I won one match my whole life. But the thing is, when the coach told me there were open tryouts at MIT for the Olympic wrestling team, and I said, well, could I try out? He said, anybody could try out. So it was the first tryout in the country. So I was the first person cut from the Olympic wrestling team in 1968. But the thing is that I tried out for the Olympics. And all these other people on the wrestling team, everyone was better than me. Everyone was from Long Island. Everyone was a New York State champ. And I said, why are you going to try out? Well, I'm not going to make the team. That's not the point. The point is I tried out for the Olympics, So that's what I'm talking about.
That is awesome. And I know a bunch about you, and we'll get into Success Hotline in a minute, but I did not know that last story. And I think that is amazing. And it goes to the idea, you'll never accomplish anything if you don't try.
Well, I mean, I've had enough students over the years. I had this woman, not now, several years ago, that I had my students perform in class, the most unbelievable singer. And what was the first big singing show on TV?
Not The Voice, America's Got Talent.
Yeah, even before that, there was another one. But, we kept trying to she would not audition. And, like I've had kids in class that, the best stand-up comics, I mean, they just come in and they riff. I mean, they're just hysterical. They will not go to a comedy club in New York on, open mic night. They just won't do it. Of course, I've had a lot of kids that have done it, but I think of the kids that, what do you want? I mean, the problem isn't not getting it. The problem is not going for it,
American Idol, that's the show.
Yeah, that's right. And they had open auditions at the Meadowlands, and she didn't go to it.
So I briefly touched on it before, the Success Hotline, 973-743-4690. So as of the recording of this, you have to share how many episodes you've done.
Let's see. I think today was 10,845.
Wow.
February 22nd, 1992, I started.
So talking about that number, it's amazingly impressive within itself, but what got you to doing it? And if you wouldn't mind just telling our listeners briefly what it is and why and how you do it.
Well, it was 1992, and I started teaching at Montclair State in 1979. So that was still early in my career. And I was teaching a graduate class, second semester, in applied sports psychology. I teach one graduate class in applied sports psychology every year. And at the beginning of the class, I'm thinking, because in high school, in graduate school, I was a wrestling coach at a high school, Hopkins Academy in Hadley, Massachusetts. So at the beginning of class, I'm thinking, I see these students once a week. I think it was Tuesday night. And when I was a wrestling coach, I used to train my kids 5, 6, 7 days a week, every single day. Where I lived, I had my own wrestling mats. I was a fanatic. And I'm thinking, how could I be with my students every single day, even though I only am scheduled to see them once a week? And these people are high school teachers and coaches. They have lives outside of me. I don't have lives outside of them. My whole life is sports psychology. So anyway, I said, what if I got a phone line and I leave a message every day? And so I called up the phone company and they gave me a 3-minute, outgoing message, and they didn't charge me too much money. And this was just for my students. I've said, I'll do this, a semester is like 14 weeks. So I'll do this for 100 straight days. And every day it will be the 100 top principles of sports psychology. And every day they could call in and get, even if we did have class or didn't have class. And by the time the 14 weeks was up, I had so many people calling, I never quit. So I had no idea, I had no idea that I'd do it this long,
I've been an avid listener myself, and actually, and this because we spoke about it, but Brian Kane is a mentor of mine, and he talks about it not only in the work he does, but also in some of his books. And I think what it says about you and the way in which you do it, and it also says, I think, a lot about the listeners and the callers, is in today's day and age, we're looking for information. We're looking for positivity. We're looking for different ways to go back to your comment early on, is inspiring people. And I think it's incredible that you've done it for so long. So I just wanted to say kudos to that.
Oh, it's not incredible. The incredible thing isn't that I've done it so long. The incredible thing is that nobody else has. Could you imagine? I know we talked before. What if we took a show person, an entertainer, and every day they spoke on the phone for 3 minutes a day? They would bond so much with, just 3 minutes a day or once a week or something. Nowadays, everybody's doing podcasts. But, imagine if you took somebody, and I think this would take an average rock star to a superstar rock star, just because you'd bond with the people.
No, I think that's true. And I'm curious to get your answer to this, but is it also the concept of being consistent too? I think that has something to do with it in regards to not only bonding, but when you consistently do something, it's the habits, it's the success. So I wanted to kind of pick your brain on that too.
Well, it's, what happens, it's at the beginning, it's discipline, discipline, discipline. And then you magically cross the bridge from discipline to desire. And, I could not do a message tomorrow. I could not do a message. It would be impossible. I've done messages in the hospital. I've done messages. I remember once I was at some retreat in Vermont, and I had to go in the men's room outside, probably 10 degrees below zero. But I can't not do it. I can't not do it. And it's a joy. It's an absolute joy. And in other people, there's a pretty famous writer. I won't say his name, but he hired me because he wanted to do hotline messages. And, he wanted to start his own hotline. And so I trained him how to do it, which wasn't too hard because he's a writer and he's very creative. And then I don't think he made it for 2 months. And I said, well, what's the problem? He said, I can't, 3 minutes. I have to write like 700-800 words for each message. I said, what do you mean? Who writes it down? I told him this at the beginning. He didn't get this part. I said, this isn't classical music. This is jazz. So as you know, as a speaker, when I coach speakers, I say, tape record every talk you ever give, because the best ideas you'll ever have is not when you're planning for the talk, it's when you're giving the talk. It's when you're playing jazz. And, the best plays that happen is, like Derek Jeter's best plays, they just happened. They weren't planned for, they just happened.
That's interesting. And I think being a huge basketball guy, I go over to Michael Jordan. I think to your point, what you said is, he didn't practice those game-winning shots against the Cleveland Cavaliers. He didn't say, okay, with 3 seconds, I'm going to go here. He adapted, and because he was so good at what he does, just like Jeter was, it happens on the fly. And I think people miss that too.
Okay, let's see if we're on the same wavelength. So do you know much about the role of the comedy?
I did some stand-up comedy, and I was part of a men's improv group in college.
So you know what riffing is, right?
Yes.
Okay, so of all the people in the history of the world, who went out on stage and riffed better than anybody ever?
In comedy or in ever?
In comedy.
I'm gonna say Eddie Murphy, but that's just my opinion.
Well, I'd say Robin Williams.
Okay.
He just did it. Now, you know who George Carlin was?
Oh, yeah.
The exact opposite. He had every word memorized, But George Carlin was a great technician. Robin Williams was a genius,
Robin, he still is one of my all-time favorite actors, and he was not only in comedy, but what he was able to do outside of comedy, just an amazing guy.
I don't know if this is true. Gotta I don't want to know if it's true. I heard that he was a state champion wrestler in Ohio.
I see. Now I got to figure that I did not know. We have to.
But I want to think it's true because I'm a wrestler. But his obsessive nature, that's what makes great wrestlers.
No, and to your point, that's what I think. He was so obsessive about his craft and being always on and always being and giving his best effort, which is remarkable. So you and I spoke offline, and the word extreme, I wanted to touch on that, but also I heard that you wrote a book in one weekend. I wanted to ask if you wouldn't mind touching on that.
Yeah, I'm always trying to get my kids to write books. I mean, why write a paper when you could write a book? And some of my students have actually written and published books while they're still undergraduates or graduate students. So one of my more abrasive students one Thursday before the weekend said, Dr. Gilbert, why don't you write a book this weekend? I've written books. He said, this weekend. I said, okay, I'll write a book this weekend. So the next week I came back to class and I showed him the title of the book. And I had it done up like a book. It says, Dr. Gilbert's one-word book on how to be extremely successful in school, sports, and sales. Dr. Gilbert's one-word book. And I said, the reason I wrote the book in one weekend, the book is only one word long. It's only one word long. And then I go around the room and I have them try to guess the book, the name, the one word. And I say, okay, it's a seven-letter word. And nobody ever guesses it. But in all my years, I've been studying sports psychology for well over 50 years. And what I study extremely successful people. People like the Dan Gables of the world, the Alexander Karelins of the world, the Michael Jordans of the world, the Ted Williamses, the Diana Nyads, the Williams sisters. I mean, what gets them to that unbelievable level? And the thing that gets them to the unbelievable level is the word
extreme.
I mean, there's energy in the word. You got to be extreme. I have my own personal army, and we are at war against average. So imagine when you, the day you got your letter from Washington College. Do you remember that?
I do, yes.
It was a big fat envelope, right? And when you saw it was fat, you say, oh, that's good. And so you open up the letter and they say, Chris, we are pleased to announce that you're in the class of 19, whatever. And all of a sudden you said, wow, that's great. No, you probably banged the table and said, I can't wait to go to watch. I can't wait to be the best tennis player, the best basketball. I'm going to get all the, you were so excited. You didn't say, I'm going to have a couple of friends. Maybe I'll join a club. I want to be on the basketball team. I really don't care if I start. Tennis, I'll play intramurals. You were so excited. And what happens? That excitement just goes away, And why it goes away? Not because we don't have it. It's we hang around with people who want to be average. Mm-hmm. And if you hang around people who want to be average, you'll be average. I tell my students, your grades this semester will be formed by the three people you hang around the most at Montclair State. So if your three friends get a 3.0, 3.5, 4.0, you got a 3.5. If they get a 1.0, 1.5, 2.0, you'll get a 1.5. So if you want to be extremely successful, you have to hang around extreme people. And I'm an extreme person. And let me tell you, when I really came up with the idea for the book, one of my heroes is Dan Gable. We're approximately the same age. And he is, without a doubt, America's greatest wrestling coach and arguably America's greatest wrestler. He won 1972. He won the Olympic gold medal. But the amazing thing is, he trained since 1966. So he was training for 6 straight years. But the amazing thing is, nobody in the Olympic tournament scored a point on this guy. They didn't even score 1 point. Imagine,
That's insane. For any of our listeners who don't understand that's just almost unheard of, right?
Is it possible to win a set without anybody scoring a point on you? So anyway, many years ago, he's giving a talk down in South Jersey, Hamilton High School, and the great Dan Gable, I'd go anywhere to hear him speak. And so, he talks, great talk, and he's a god. I don't think there's anybody, they say a legend in his own time. There's nobody is revered among his peers. I mean, wrestling, Dan Gable is the guy, I think Dan Gable is head and shoulders above everybody else, more than anybody in any field.
Really?
Like,
wow.
I think Dan Gable is more above everybody else and his reputation than Michael Jordan would be in basketball or well, whatever. So anyway, I didn't want to ask this question during the question and answer because it's too weird a question. So afterwards, I waited for everybody to clear out, and everybody took selfies, and everybody, gave out. Nicest guy in the world. And I said, Dan, I hate to bother you, but I came 2 hours just to ask you a weird question. He said, what's that? He said, I said, Dan, how come you won everything and I won nothing? He said, well, where'd you go to school? I said, UMass. He said, well, I went to Iowa State. He said, well, you're on the wrestling team? I said, yeah. He said, yeah, I was too. I said, Dan, I know you were on the wrestling team. And he said, when did you work out in the afternoon? And I said, look, 4 to 6, 4 to 6:30. He said, yeah, we did too. He said, what did you do at the end of practice? I said, I'd say the last 20, 25 minutes was conditioning. He said, yeah, we did too. And he said, what did you do when practice was over? I said, well, to tell you the truth, I crawled out of the wrestling room. I got to the locker room. I took a shower, got dressed, and went to the dining hall to eat. He said, that's the difference. He said, I made sure the heat in the wrestling rooms could crank up heat because people have to lose weight. I made sure the heat was as high as it could go. I too went back to the locker room, but I didn't go eat. I put on my rubber suit. I put on a hood sweatshirt. I got my jump rope, and I went back into the wrestling room and jumped rope until I passed out. Now, when he said the words, until I passed out, I got this split screen in my mind. Dan Gable jumping rope until he passed out, and Rob Gilbert eating a pork chop. That's why he's an Olympic champ. Now, the thing is, he never passed out, but he was willing to be so extreme that nobody. Have you ever heard of an athlete training until they passed out? I mean, that's how extreme he was. I mean, he did stuff. It's like the old story I tell on Success Hotline. There's this young girl that wants to be the Olympic figure skating champion, but she has to train twice a day. And the first time she has to train is 5 a.m. And she loves figure skating, but it's kind of hard getting up at 5 a.m. But she figured out a strategy. Right by her old-fashioned alarm clock, she put a picture of the current Russian world champion. And underneath the picture, she wrote the words, "Comrade, while you were sleeping, I was training." So Gable has that. I would suggest that anybody that's interested in extreme, go to Google and type in a kid who doesn't kid around, and you'll find an article about Dan Gable that was published in Sports Illustrated right before the 1972 Olympics. And then you'll see the mindset of a champion, the mindset of an extreme person. You realize I'm not trying to give a talk here today. I am trying to sell you on extreme, because in a day, a week, or month, a year, I want you to email me and say, yeah, that extreme stuff works. I'm trying to reset your mindset. We live in a world of average. Like, average is okay, and everybody's okay. For example, you see somebody and they say, how you doing? I'm okay. That
they say that's the most common answer. Hey, how you doing? I'm okay.
Okay.
But I'm in. You've sold me on extreme, and so I have to ask this question because I'm a big fan of books, and I think today's day and age people have in some ways gone away from the old fashioned book, but I read all the time. So I have to ask you if you're currently reading something, or perhaps you've read something recently that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
Well, I just read a book called Bandini about Drew Bandini Brown, who was the motivator for Muhammad Ali. Ali had he had his trainers, he had his entourage, but he had a guy that he kept around just to motivate him, Drew Bandini Brown, and a fabulous book. It's just called Bandini. Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous book.
I appreciate that. I've never heard of him or that book, so I appreciate that. If you could go back and
the one that came up with "Float Like a Butterfly, Sting Like a Bee."
He's the one who did that.
I mean, and he and Ali, Rumble, Young Man, Rumble. They used to have this repartee. But I mean, that is the greatest sports affirmation in the world. Float like a butterfly, sting like. I mean, that's exactly what you want to do as a fighter. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee.
No, that's powerful. So, if you could go back and give the 20-year-old version of yourself only one piece of advice, what would it be?
You have all the ability, and all you're lacking is the strategy. Like way back when I was 20 years old, I thought other people were smarter than me. No, they studied more than I did. I thought they were born with more athletic ability than me. No, they trained better. I thought they were more creative than me. No, I mean, they all had mentors. It comes down, if I'm going to have one word on my tombstone, it's training, I mean, it all comes down to training. So you have all the ability you need already inside you, and all you're lacking is a strategy. All you're lacking is a technique. Let me tell you a quick strategy story. Maybe the greatest left-hand pitcher of all time, maybe the greatest pitcher of all time, is Sandy Koufax. Sandy Koufax grew up in Brooklyn, and he was also a great basketball player. And he was signed by the Brooklyn Dodgers. This is back in the 50s. And he has this unbelievable left-handed fastball, in the high 90s, but he didn't have any control over it. But I believe in the power of the single idea, that one thing could happen one time and bang, your life changes forever. And one day he's in spring training, and before a game, he's warming up, and the warm-up catcher said, "Sandy, in today's game, why don't you do something different? Why don't you throw softer?" I mean, nobody ever said those words, throw softer. That unlocked, that key, those two words were the key and unlock. So I think he threw a 5-inning no-hitter in that. And then all of a sudden, he went from here to here. He went from average to extraordinary just by taking a little. So not by doing more, by doing less, which for him was extreme.
I love that. So we're going to switch over to our hot seat questions. And the only request we have of you is you spit out the first thing that comes to mind. So last meal, you can pick absolutely anything. What do you pick?
Oh, I thought you would think of the last meal I had. The last meal I will ever eat, the thing that intuitively came to me, even though I don't eat it, is lobster. Because I love lobster, but I don't eat lobster. But I think I'd eat lobster.
Favorite smell?
Lavender. I love the smell of chamomile tea. I love, lavender, I think, is number one.
Do you have an all-time favorite sport? I think I know what it is, but.
All-time favorite sport? I used to have a lot of favorite sports. Now I don't have. I love the stories about sports. Like, I'm a Red Sox fan, but if it were Game 7 in the World Series and they said, "Gilbert, you could have a choice. Either the Red Sox could win the World Series or they could lose, and there'll be a great story," I'd rather have the story than the win.
Wow. So is your all-time favorite team the Boston Red Sox then?
Well, every Boston, the Red Sox, the Celtics. I see people with the Belichick sweatshirts on, and I'll go up to them like an old man does. And I said, "How long have you been a Patriots fan?" It was, "Oh, a long time." I said, "What's a long time?" "Oh, about 5 or 6 years." I said, "I'm a Patriots fan. 1962, I was selling Coca-Colas at Boston University Field in the first year of the AFL, So.
Do you have an all-time favorite movie?
Well, I have, I almost never read fiction, and I only watch documentary movies. And my all-time favorite movie, no, Chariots of Fire. Chariots of Fire is the only movie I went to see in New York, and I heard about if anything in sports, I'll go and see it. And it's the first time, as soon as the movie was over, I went to the ticket guy, I bought another ticket, and I watched twice in a row.
Wow.
That's the only movie I've ever done that to.
I've watched the same movie in the same week, but I don't know anybody that's watched the movie back. That's pretty impressive.
I mean, the story, the music, I mean, it just takes you in, you know? Oh, the greatest movie that's never been a movie is ever, and the greatest sports book ever written. So I am lucky enough to say that my mother is 98 years old and has all of her facilities. She reads more than anybody I know.
Boys on the Boat?
Huh?
Boys on the Boat, or?
Yes. How did you know?
Because I listened to your the Success Hotline.
What I can tell is that my mother called me up one day and she says, Robert, I got a book about sports for you to read. I said, Mom, you don't read sports books. She said, yeah, but this is, Mom, I've already read it. The Boys in the Boat. Oh my God. And they have like some PBS shorts. If you're listening to this and you haven't watched anything about the Boys in the Boat, turn the podcast off, come back to us and watch something on YouTube. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
So you had said before we went live that you wanted to do an exercise with me then, and I'm curious if you still want to do that.
Absolutely. Okay. So suppose, everything I teach has to do with you have the ability, all you're lacking is a strategy, And then after you buy into that, so the first thing is you have the ability already inside you. You are not lacking ability. That's an excuse, but it's not the truth. You are not, you're musical, you're talented, you're athletic. Okay. What you are lacking is a strategy. And then once you put the ability and strategy together, then you develop skill. And then you have to Goya, get off your backside and actually practice like a maniac. Like somebody once asked the great John Wooden, he said, how do you teach skill in basketball? He said, well, I have a 100-part system. And they said, well, what is it? Well, step one is demonstration. I demonstrate. Step two is imitation. The athlete imitates what I do. Step three is I correct. And step four is practice. So demonstration, imitation, correction, practice. Then the person that Wooden's talking to said, but coach, you said there were 100 steps. That's only 4. Oh, excuse me. Demonstration, imitation, correction, practice, 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 practice. That's it. So you got to practice like a maniac. Alexander Karelin, a better wrestler than Dan Gable. I don't think somebody scored a point on Alexander Karelin in international competition in 10 years. And check out anything Karelin, Karelin. It's scary how good this guy was. His nickname was the Experiment. He was like 6'3", 6'4", 285 pounds, maybe a 5% body fat. And one day, a sports writer who was courageous actually confronted Karelin. He said, Mr. Karelin, I don't know if you realize this, but behind your back, your competitors call you a derogatory nickname, the Experiment. He said, how do you feel being called the Experiment? They call the Experiment because they know you're taking drugs, but they don't know what you're taking. And he said, well, I've never failed a drug test, so how could I be taking my drugs? But I'll tell them my drug is training. I train harder every day than my competition will train any day. I train harder any day. So imagine if you're a pre-med major and you study chemistry harder every day than the kids will study the night before the test. You'll get into medical school. So I train harder every day than my competition will do any day.
That's amazing. I absolutely love that. So for our listeners who want to find out more about you, but also for the ones who would like to call the Success Hotline, please tell them how they can do that.
Well, after we do the exercise.
Oh, so gotcha. Let's go.
Let's go through the 4 things. You got to believe in your ability, find the right strategy, train like a maniac, and then there's no failure, just feedback. There's no losing, there's just learning. So the questions are, do you believe there's a Superman or Superwoman already inside you? Yes. Do you believe you could do anything anybody else could do if you discover the strategies? Yes. Could you get rid of limiting words like maybe, but, if, impossible, what if, whatever, and just do it? Of course you could. And do you believe there's no failure, just feedback? Do you believe there's no losing, there's just learning? And if you could say yes to those 4 things, and then adopt the extreme mindset, you're going to lead the world in something. See, what I tell my students the first day of class is I don't want them to graduate. I want them to win a Rhodes Scholarship. I don't want my students to get high grades. I want them to be in the history books. So let's see if we could do something extraordinary. So I want you to make believe that you've been training for the most elite military organization in the world. There's something that people don't, this is all fantasy, okay? There's something that people don't even know about that's even more elite than the Navy SEALs, the more elite the Army, but nobody knows about it because it's so secretive. And they've been checking you out because you don't try out for them. They recruit you, then they test you, and they get rid of 99 out of 100 people. But they recruited you, and you took the 5 days of testing, the physical testing, underwater, holding your breath, and doing a Murph every 2 hours, and just unbelievable stuff. And you got the highest scores ever. And they say, Chris, great job. You passed the physical part. Now we got to give you the psychological part. They say, well, I'm ready. They say, well, this is as important. It's a 20-second test, and this is as important as the previous 5 days. She said, I'm ready. So you ready, Chris?
I'm ready.
You have a pen and a piece of paper?
I do.
Okay. So what I want you to do, the test is, I want you to draw as many triangles as you can in 20 seconds, okay? So the test is draw as many triangles as you can in 20 seconds. So of course you're probably thinking, well, maybe I should draw smaller triangles and bigger triangles. Well, whatever. But I'll time you. Do I have my timer here? I'll time you, and I'll tell you when to stop, and try to do as many as you can. Okay, ready? Any questions?
No, sir. I'm good.
On your mark, get set, begin. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, stop. Okay, count up how many triangles.
23.
23. So I'm the test administrator, and you come out, say 23. Are you okay? Feeling all right? Are you nervous? I said, Chris, I do this with 6th graders. They get 24. I said, Chris, look, you're disqualified. But not, since you did so well, we'll let you come back a week from today, okay? And I'll retest you the same thing, and maybe you could get your act together. So you go home and you are destroyed, totally destroyed. And you're telling people about this weird test with the triangles. And you tell enough people, and one of your friends says, hey, Chris, I can't believe you're telling me this story. One of my friends, he went to school in New Jersey, and he says he has this wacko professor of sports psychology, and the guy's claim to fame is he's the world's leading trainer on how to draw triangles fast. You say, oh, come on, you're kidding me. You know I feel bad. You said, no, just check out sports psychology. So you get sports psychology, and you come up with the name Gilbert. And you call me up. He said, Dr. Gilbert, I don't know if you've heard this. I shouldn't be telling you, it's all confidential, but the super secret. Oh, Chris, I know the whole story. Come down and meet with me, okay? So you come down and meet with me. And I say, okay, let me give you the test. And you take the test and you'll get 23. I say, Chris, I'm going to change your life. Chris, could you draw a 5-pointed star? Could you draw a 5-pointed star, Chris?
Yep.
Okay. So now all you have to do to become part of this super elite group, do you think you could draw a 5-pointed star 1 per second for 20 seconds?
Yes.
And that will be more than they ever expected. So I'm going to retest you, okay? I'm going to retest you. I'll go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'll tell you when to stop. And then you just draw as many 5-pointed stars as you can. Okay, you're all set?
I'm ready.
Ready? On your mark, get set, go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, stop. Now, Just count the number of stars. Don't count the number of triangles.
19.
19. So in each 5-pointed star, how many triangles are in each one of the stars?
4. 1, 2, 5.
5. So 19 times 5, that's 95. So you went from, what did you have, 23?
Yep.
So basically you improved like 400%, you know? And that's not an improvement. That's a breakthrough. See, a breakthrough is called an arranged miracle. Now, that gets across everything I want to teach. All of a sudden, why focus on improvement when focus on breakthrough? So here's a question that nobody ever gets right. There is only one person in the world of sports that qualifies as a genius who's alive right now. Do you have any idea? Idea who that would be? Okay. Well, people say, well, Bill Belichick's a genius. No. See, a really, 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 really great coach improves stuff. A genius has breakthroughs. So if, Roger Bannister, he was the first person to run the mile under 4 minutes. That was hard work. That was industriousness. I mean, that wasn't a breakthrough, even though they say it is. It really wasn't. But what I would like our listeners to do is, there was this high school kid who was a high jumper, and he wasn't any good, but he really loved high jumping. And then one day he had an idea that everybody's doing it wrong, because they were doing like the Western style jump with your stomach would be down and you'd go over the bar. He started jumping with his head and shoulders first, backwards over the bar. It was called the Fosbury flop. He ended up winning the Olympic gold medal. And every Olympic gold medal in the high jump since his use of Fosbury flop. That is a breakthrough. That is genius. That is changing the game. See, right now we're in the world of improving the game. Imagine, why don't we start thinking about changing the game? Like the forward pass in football, that was a breakthrough. If you remember old-fashioned typewriters and then going to electric typewriters, that wasn't a breakthrough, that was improvement. Word processing, that's a breakthrough. Having the mail go faster was an improvement. FedEx, breakthrough.
I love that. I'm going to use that. You said I was going to use it for all my talks. I'm definitely going to incorporate that. Well,
here's how I'd use it. I mean, I'm a speaker too, and when people say, we don't just want to hire you, could you just show us what you do, or tell us what you do? I just do play that game with them. I said, that's what I'm about. I'm about trying to have your salespeople figure out, how could they not improve? I mean, they make 100,000 to 125,000. Why don't they go to $1 million? If somebody else in the field's making $1 million, they can too.
I love that.
It's exciting for me. And we're in the world of improvement. Everybody just wants to forget about improvement. I mean, one of the assignments, I give my students some interesting assignments. In one class, I say, invent a new game, invent a new sport. These kids, what was it, 1968 at Columbia High School in Maplewood, New Jersey. It was a phys ed class, and the phys ed teacher, who didn't want anything to do with the class that day, he just gave them Frisbees. And these kids said, hey, let's make a game. They invented Ultimate Frisbee. And I could go into the story about how basketball was invented, the same thing at Springfield College. And then check out a Shrita Furman. In my other class, I say, your assignment for this semester is to set a world record. And I show them videos of a Shrita Furman. A Shrita Furman from Jamaica, Queens, New York, holds a world record for holding the most world records. He has set more world records than anybody in the history of the world. And a Shrita Furman was a really, really smart kid. He went to Columbia, but he flunked phys ed in high school. So he wasn't an athlete, but he is strategic and he trains. He believes in his ability, finds the right strategy, Goya, and analyzes results.
I love that. So I got to ask you, what's the best way for our listeners to follow you and connect with you? And also, what's the best way for them to get onto your Success Hotline?
Well, the best way to get on my Success Hotline is not call my hotline. I have the podcast. See, if you listen to today's message, there's no way to listen to yesterday's message on the podcast, because eventually I'm phasing out the phone line. The podcast is www.thesuccesshotline.com, www.thesuccesshotline.com. And a very nice company, Ironclad, puts together my podcast, and They've been doing it for the last month or so, and they do a great job. And they're about 30 or 40 or 50. Well, but I don't know when this is going to air, but all my messages are there.
I love it. And then last question we have is the same one we ask everybody, is if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
Any parting words? Well, it would be extreme. I mean, try to adopt extreme, not as a word, as a lifestyle. Now, am I talking about 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? No. But if you know you want to be like Einstein, you could check this out on the web. Einstein got great grades in math and physics, but he didn't get grades in social science. I mean, you don't have to be great in everything. You just have to be great in one thing. Just be world class. Say, I want to be the best. I want to know more about the Statue of Liberty than anybody in the world. And I could give you a game plan. Study the Statue of Liberty 1 hour a day. Is a great motivational speaker, Zig Ziglar, said, if you study one topic 1 hour a day for 5 years, you'll probably know more about that topic than anybody in the world, if you delimit the topic. So if you study foul shooting, you'll know more about foul shooting than anybody in the world.
I love that. Great advice. Dr. Gilbert, I thank you for what you shared, and I know that you and I will connect again soon, and thank you very much for your time today.
It has been an absolute pleasure to talk with you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to episode number 312. Dr. Gilbert is all about inspiring others to succeed. Not only is he a doctor and a professor, but he is also a huge encourager of others. I love how he said that he is at a war against average, because I honestly believe that we are all meant for greatness. To conclude today's episode, I would like to repeat Dr. Gilbert's parting words. Adapt extreme as a lifestyle and challenge yourself to be world-class in something. And remember, we rise by lifting others up.
And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.